Welcome back to the Cult of Ignorance podcast, where we ask big questions, question big answers, and unapologetically poke holes in loud nonsense. I'm your host, I'm Robin Jackson. We're diving into a question you've probably asked yourself while scrolling through social media, or maybe while sitting at a family dinner. Why is it that the people who know the least are always the ones shouting the loudest? Let's find out. Have you ever met someone who's so confident, so sure of themselves, you start doubting your own understanding, even though you actually know what you're talking about? Let's start with something we've all experienced. Picture a meeting, a family debate, or a group chat. There's always that one person, loud, certain, unyielding, who dominates the conversation. But if you listen closely, their certainty rarely matches their substance. This isn't just an observation, it's a psychological fact. In 1999, psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger identified what's now called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's the idea that people with low ability in a domain tend to overestimate their competence. Why? Because the very skills needed to recognize your own ignorance are the same ones you need to be competent in the first place. In other words, you have to know a little to realize how much you don't know. Meanwhile, real experts, they often doubt themselves, assuming everyone else knows what they know. The short version, you have to be smart enough to know you're dumb. And the truly dumb, they have no idea how dumb they are. So they talk a lot. Meanwhile, actual experts, people who've studied and researched and questioned, often doubt themselves because the more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know. Bertrand Russell said it best. Fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people so full of doubts. Here's the thing, certainty feels good. It's warm. It's cozy. It's like a mental weighted blanket in an uncertain world. But certainty without knowledge, that's just arrogance wearing a lab coat. There's another cognitive trap called the illusion of explanatory depth. Most of us think we understand things like how a toilet works or how inflation impacts interest rates. But press us for details and our understanding falls apart. Yet the louder we talk, the more we convince ourselves and others that we're right. The louder someone is about a complex issue, the more likely it is they've Googled one article and decided they're now the leading expert on epidemiology, international trade, or gender studies. In group settings, this confidence is often mistaken for competence. Studies show we're more likely to follow assertive people even when they're wrong. Think about what that means for elections, boardrooms, or even scientific debates. Now let's talk about the real MVP in the cult of ignorance, social media. We've built entire platforms where volume and confidence, not truth, get the spotlight. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, X. They all reward engagement, not accuracy. Influence used to come from expertise. Now it comes from engagement. That's why anti vaccine rhetoric, conspiracy theories, and political disinformation aren't spread by scholars. They're spread by confident amateurs with a following. So who wins? Not the scientist carefully explaining nuance, not the philosopher dissecting complexity. Nope. The algorithm favors the guy in a truck yelling into his phone with the caption, "Wake up, sheeple." He's got confidence. He's got conviction. He's also got absolutely no idea what he's talking about. Complex truths don't fit into a soundbite. Loud opinions do. But as Carl Sagan once said, truth is not determined by the number of people who believe in it. Let's flip the script for a minute. We've talked about the loud fools. What about the quiet thinkers? You know, the type, they ask questions, they pause, they say things like, "That's a complicated issue," or "I'm still learning." And the world treats them like they're weak, but they're not. They're wise. In my book, The Cult of Ignorance, I explore how our culture has normalized, even celebrated ignorance. Historically, authoritarian regimes and cults weaponized certainty. Charismatic leaders shouted while dissenters were silenced. Doubt isn't weakness, doubt is intellectual humility. It means you recognize the limits of your own understanding. It means you're open to learning, to growing, to being wrong. And in a world full of loud certainty, that kind of humility is radical. It's also deeply threatening to those who have built their identity on knowing it all. Look, I get it. I used to be one of those loud voices. Growing up in a religious cult, I was trained to speak with certainty, to knock on doors, and offer absolute answers to life's biggest questions. There was no room for doubt, no space for I'm not sure. Doubt was a weakness, a sin even. Those who questioned were marginalized or excommunicated. This isn't just emotional abuse, it's intellectual sabotage. Leaving that world was like detoxing from a lifetime addiction to certainty. It was terrifying, but it was also liberating. Because here's the truth, it's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to shut up and listen. Now, this isn't just an intellectual curiosity. Loud ignorance is dangerous. In politics, in religion, in education, we see the same pattern. The loudest people dominate the conversation, even when what they're saying is false, misleading, or downright harmful. Loud ignorance isn't just a quirk of human nature, it's a tool of control. The more confident the uninformed appear, the more they crowd out the experts and suppress critical thinking. Noam Chomsky's idea of manufacturing consent applies here. In politics, media, and religion, confidence is used to control narratives. If a lie is told loudly and often enough, it becomes truth, at least to those listening. Confidence gets attention, attention gets power, and power keeps ignorance in place. And when ignorance is loud, thoughtful people go quiet. They start second guessing themselves, or they just leave the conversation altogether. And who benefits? The charlatans, the demagogues, the snake oil salesmen with podcast sponsors and book deals. So, what do we do? How do we fight back against this cult of loud ignorance? Here's a few things. Normalize I don't know. Seriously, make it cool again. Celebrate thinkers, not shouters. Give your attention to people who are thoughtful, nuanced, maybe even a little hesitant. Teach critical thinking. Not just facts, but how to evaluate arguments and spot fallacies and ask better questions. Reward curiosity. Praise kids and adults alike for saying, tell me more instead of, here's how it is. And for the love of logic, stop giving microphones to people who think volume equals truth. And in my book, The Cult of Ignorance, I talk about how ignorance isn't just a lack of knowledge, it's a cultural force. It's been normalized, celebrated, monetized. We've built systems, religious, political, digital, that reward confidence and punish doubt. And it's turning our society into a loud, echoing chamber of misinformation and misplaced certainty. But here's the good news. There's an uprising of quiet thinkers out there. People like you, people who are tired of the noise, people who are asking better questions, people who are learning how to listen. You're not alone. So next time someone walks into a room shouting about things they clearly don't understand, take a breath, smile, and remember, the loudest people often know the least. You, you're listening, you're thinking, you're doubting. That makes you dangerous in the best way. In the end, the quiet thinkers will always outlast the loud pretenders. While noise is fleeting, wisdom echoes through the ages. Thanks for tuning in to The Cult of Ignorance. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review. Share it with your quiet, thoughtful friends. And if you must, shout it from the rooftops. Just make sure you know what you're shouting about. I'm Robin Jackson. Stay skeptical and stay curious.